Hey everyone, welcome to Enable My Child's monthly webinar series. Tonight we're going to be talking about lively learners. And this webinar tonight is focused on children ages 7 to 12. I'm Dr. Shelli Dry and I'm the Director of Clinical Operations at Enable My Child. I'm going to share my PowerPoint and then we'll get started. Okay. Let's get to the beginning. So I always like to start by looking at the objectives for tonight. One of the things we want to do is explore the methods to develop a positive mindset for learning. That is, we want our kids to think positively about all their learning experiences, and we want to help them strive to succeed by developing that positive mindset. Another thing we'd like to do tonight is explore the areas of helping the more active child learn how to develop those classroom routines. And finally, we want to look at power struggles and how we can help children be more successful and decrease some of those power struggles that get in our way. So let's look at that positive mindset. Well, one of the things we know is that children are naturally curious. And so we're going to use that curiosity to help them with their positive thinking. So developing a positive mindset is all about thinking on purpose. We want the children to start developing positive statements, and we're going to help them. We're going to give them those positive statements until they start to internalize those thoughts. We want our kids to think that they're good at things. So we start to work on that. I'm good at this. I can do this. I'm curious about how that works. Wow, I am so eager to learn more about that. I'm a positive thinker because I'm curious. I know I'm on the right track. And then we have our children who are more adventurous. And we want them to think of that adventurous nature as being a great thing that's going to help their learning develop. So let's help them develop those positive statements. I will make this an adventure. I can make my learning more creative. I have a free spirit, and that free spirit is going to help me learn. We want them to think of their adventure as a very positive event in their life and a very positive part of who they are. We have children who are so powerful. Sometimes we call those kids strong-willed, but we can use that strong will positively. We want them to think of themselves as being powerful and having the strength to start over if something goes wrong. We want them to think of their power as energy and remind themselves that they're energetic and they can get it done. We have the children who are so persistent. And persistence, to me, that has always been a positive aspect of children. Some people may look at it as stubbornness, but if we reframe that thought and we think of them as being persistent, then we can help them learn how to use that persistence to develop their strengths and to go really far with what they need to do and what they need to learn. So let them take that persistence and say, I'm very persistent, so I'm not going to give up. This problem may be difficult, but I know that if I keep trying and I don't give up, I can get it done. Persistence is a wonderful strategy. We can also look at their sensitivity. Now, some children are very sensitive, and sometimes that looks like them being more emotional. But what we want them to start to think about is how their sensitivity can help them move forward in this world. If they start thinking of sensitivity as being intuitive, then they will start to learn that they can use that intuition, use that sensitivity to look at the boundaries and look at what they are able to then determine the next step to be. We want them to think of their sensitivity as a heightened discriminative ability. And because they have that heightened discriminative ability, we know that they can figure things out. So we want to help them learn that positive mindset. I'm sensitive and I can figure this out. I can focus on what I can do, and I can focus on my interest and then use my persistence to fit this new learning routine into one of my interests. You see how that works together. We just turn around some of the negativity and reframe their thinking, find out how they can use those positive aspects. So we have those kids who are curious, adventurous, persistent, powerful, and sensitive. And when we're lucky, they have several of those skills. So let's look next at methods for developing engagement. We want our children to be able to engage in the learning routines, and we need to help them by making things a routine. We can even back that up though. We can start with just our daily routines. So if you have a child who has a harder time waking up and getting started in the morning, you can make it a routine to get up with a little bit more livelihood. Start to put some of those activities into their day that helps wake you up and helps wake them up. It can be, jumping jacks. It can be crunchy food. Whatever you know that helps them alert their system, put that into part of their routine. And then continue your routines throughout the day to help structure their learning environments. So we start with our morning routine, trying to set the day in a positive nature, and then we add structure into their day and into their school. I'm going to talk a little bit about checklists and how useful those are to develop that structure for kids, but also how we can follow things the same way when we're introducing a new topic, using structured method for introducing that topic, and then tying it into something they already know to help them learn. Another thing we want to look at is how we can use the children's strengths, because we all know we learn better as adults when we are using our strengths. So we want to take that strengths approach, use what they're really good at, and then bring in some of the more difficult things a little bit later. And then, of course, we want to encourage the kids. And encouragement can come in many different ways, so we'll look at that also. And finally, we need to make it fun. And with our more active learners, one of the things you can do to benefit their need for activity and to make learning fun is take some movement breaks. So we'll talk a little bit about that. All right, so I told you we'd talk about checklists. Checklists are a great way to structure any learning environment. You can either make it an actual list and put it on your computer if you're doing online learning, or put it beside the child so they can check things off as they go. But you want to go a little bit beyond just writing things down. To help them organize and structure the event, you want to number the steps of the lesson. So you break your lesson down into 4 or 5 parts, and then you number each part. And remember what we talked about just a few minutes ago, we want to try to start the activity the same way. So it might be introducing the activity. And then the next step might be looking through it before you actually get involved. Making a plan would be the third step. You may need to look things up, and then you may need to revise your plan. But you just write these down, you number them, and you try to do things the same way to develop that structure and put it into the checklist so they know that when they finished it, they can either check it off, they can delete it if they're working online. You know, there's so many different ways. Some people like to make it a game where they highlight it and then have the child blow it away and it's finished. Then another thing, you know, we talked about the check boxes. Another thing is to try to individualize their learning and individualize the lesson. Again, using their strengths and using those things that make the lesson more positive for them. So the strengths that we really need to develop in our active learners and really in all learners are some of these executive functioning skills. Now, executive functioning is, you know, it's that higher brain level learning, but it's skills that we can break down and we can develop and we can improve upon. These aren't all of them. These are just the 5 more important ones that will help us towards learning when we're looking at that age 7 to 12. So time management's difficult for 7-year-olds and even 12-year-olds, but there are things you can do to help develop time management for your child. So one of the things I like to do is help the child identify the priorities. And then once they have that done, they can set reminders. So, you know, if they have a Alexa, or if they even have a watch with an alarm on it, or a clock, or any way to set a reminder. Some children do better if their reminder comes when it's tied into a routine. So when you're working on time management, you start to tie, if you're going to tie it into a routine, you might say, okay, you eat breakfast, and then you get dressed, and as soon as you finish getting dressed, you can brush your teeth, and then we come down to the table to learn. So it's just tying it into that normal routine that occurs every day, so they start to think, I brush my teeth, I sit down at the table. You know, I eat breakfast, get dressed, I brush my teeth, I go get my books for learning. So setting those reminders. And then the next thing is establishing a maximum time for completion. One of the hard things about time management is there's not a good start and finish to some routines and some learning events. So if we say, you know, we have our child and we know that they can do a good 30 minutes, but then they need a break, then we're going to set that maximum time at 30 minutes or even at 25 so that they're successful. And then you can expand that out as they get better with it. But setting that maximum time and then allowing them to take a break and then come back to it will really benefit their time management skills. Now, the next one's kind of hard for a lot of kids. It's flexibility. Now, flexibility requires them to shift gears. And some children who are hyper-focused on one thing, they have that persistent nature, have a very hard time with shifting gears. So we're going to help them develop that by using past experiences to make decisions on how they should act. So you can remind them when they're having a really hard time about a time in the past, and it can be something simple where they decided, you know, that they were going to give in and shift what they wanted to do to what you wanted to do, and how successful they were. Another thing with flexibility is it requires a lot of emotional control. So working on that self-control in kids is going to help them develop more flexibility, because they can put aside some of their tendency to be upset when things are not going how they want, or when they need to stop doing a preferred activity and shift gears. So working on emotional control. And then another thing you want to work with for flexibility is their ability to revise their plans. And you can help them in that way. You can say, well, you can give them the idea, if this doesn't work, we can try it your way. Let's try it this way first, and then or you can tell them, if this plan is not working for you, it's not good enough for you, then we can put this plan aside and kind of push it to the side, so that they get the idea that they're going to push it away. And then we're going to come back and we're going to make a brand new plan. And I'm going to listen to your ideas and make a brand new plan with you. And we'll just start over. It's given them that opportunity to know that they don't, just because something goes wrong, it doesn't mean that you can't start over and that you can't try again. And then the other thing that's really helpful with developing flexibility is teaching meditation to kids. There's a lot of material out there now on developing mindfulness in children. And part of mindfulness is meditation, and teaching kids to control their breath and to think about what they want to do, and just bring themselves to that level of calm control, and then trying again. So the next strength we want to talk about is that working memory. Working memory is not the easiest thing for kids to develop unless it comes naturally to them. And some children, it really does come naturally. So you've got those children, I know you all do, or you've seen them or met them, who remember everything. And they remember all the details, and they have the strongest working memory. And then you have these other guys who they have a hard time keeping at the front of their mind what they're trying to say or get across. So one of the things we want to do for developing working memory is we want to teach them how to use past experiences and then relate that to new learning. So that's so much more difficult to do than what it sounds. But if you're thinking about, again, you always want to work on something that has been successful and bring that in to developing the memory, and the experiences have to be something that means something to your child. So if you have a child who's super focused on, say they love to learn about dinosaurs, and that's what they've really been focused on. And my 7-year-old was thrilled with dinosaurs. He'd read dinosaur encyclopedias. Everything we did had to do with dinosaurs. So you're now trying to relate some other concept that they need to work on. Say you're working on math. And, 7-year-olds, they're just starting to do that addition, subtraction. You can use the dinosaurs to work with math, of course, you all know that. But you can also take that a little bit further and use species of dinosaurs. You can have them sort all of the ones who are meat eaters from all the plant eaters, and then you can add that together. You can see how you can build on the concept, but also you're using that past experience of, or past enjoyable experience of dinosaurs, and learning about dinosaurs to teach them a new routine. Let's look at task initiation. So our active learners are really good at initiating what they want to do, but what we want to do is give them the steps to help them learn to initiate what they have to do. So if we think about task initiation, it really is the ability to begin. It's the opposite of procrastination, and procrastination, I think, comes naturally to most of us, being able to put off something that we don't want to do. So the hard part is teaching them how to begin the task. Another thing is working on decreasing that perfectionist tendency. So a lot of our kids, they really want to do it right. They love to please us, and so they want their drawing, they want their papers, they want everything to be just right, and it has to be perfect. So we need to help them learn that it doesn't have to be perfect, or at least the first time. If they're really perfectionistic, we just need to decrease that tendency a little bit, get them to get it down, because that's going to get that initiation going, let them start the activity, and then they can work on making it better. I love graphic organizers. They are absolutely fantastic for kids who have difficulty with task initiation. You start by just getting those ideas down. And what I like to do with the graphic organizer is make your big center circle. You know, this is our concept. This is what we're going to do. This is our end point. And then draw those lines off of it and let them start to put those pieces together. Once they get this on paper, it really helps them get their mind around what they want to do, and it makes it easier for them to then have a starting point. They see where their end point is, that big circle in the middle, and then each little piece of it is how they're going to make that task come together for them. And then the last thing is, of course, sustained attention. And we all know how important that is for learning, but let's look a little bit at how we can help the kids develop it. Because task initiation and sustained attention go kind of hand in hand. Once you get it started, you have to be able to stick with it until you get it done. One of the things about sustained attention is, one of the interrupters is that it doesn't seem manageable if the child does not understand the start and the finish. So when you think about it, even if you're working on something, if you don't know where your end goal is, it's hard to then stay focused on it until you get to the end. So we can give them manageable chunks of time to where they work for a small amount of time. We'll set an alarm. When the alarm goes off, you're going to take a break, and then you're going to come back. Making it more manageable for children actually makes it easier for them to be able to sustain their attention, because they know, okay, I only need to look at it for this long. I need to work this long. Then I get to take a break. The timer's going to go off. I'm going to take my break. When the timer goes off again, I'm going to come back, and I'm going to work on it a little bit longer until the next break. The other thing, again, we've talked about checklists. Those are a good way for sustained attention, is taking that lesson that you're trying to teach, breaking it down into little pieces, setting the break. They come back, they check off that part's done. They go to step 2. They work on that part of the task. Set your timer again, let them work steadily, and then when the timer goes off, they take their break. If they're done, they check it off. It's just doing these little pieces together helps the child structure and organize their learning day, but it also helps them feel success and feel fulfilled within themselves because they're now able to manage things. So we talked a lot about how we're going to get there, but how are we going to keep them there? So we need to bring in that encouragement. And one of the things children, if learning's difficult or if paying attention's difficult, if they just want to be up and playing, we have to help them start to develop those internal rewards that help them stay focused. But we're going to do that through encouragement. So I think I've talked a bit about making things successful, making the child feel successful. We can do that through task modification. And of course, that's just breaking the task down into simple steps, identifying the start and the finish, making it easier for kids to see the end go and to see how they're going to get there. So making your plan and even helping your child make their plan, even using those graphic organizers or whatever you're going to do to develop that plan, but then breaking it into chunks and making the task much easier for them. And of course, we want to start with where they are when we're teaching something new. So start with their current level, where they are in their learning, so that we're not jumping way ahead. We got to start where they're successful and then gradually build upon that success to bring new things in. Of course, we want to help them set goals, because when you set a goal, then that gives you that feeling of accomplishment. So we want them to set goals that are manageable for them to do, and then help them feel accomplished, feel that sense of accomplishment when they set it, and then they can set another one. So some kids really want to set these huge goals, and they think they're going to get 4 or 5 chapters done in a day, and they've got all these plans of they're gonna work on a project, but their project's like way over the top, and we need to teach them, well, how about, without discouraging them, how about instead of instead of starting up here to make this huge project, let's figure out what we need to do to bring the project together. So we're going to, again, modify the task, break it down into smaller pieces, help them set goals that are smaller and more manageable so that they feel success. And of course, having a finish line is a big part of that. And then the final thing is we've got to celebrate their accomplishments. So we want them not only to feel the success internally, but we want them to know that we also see that they are working hard, they're trying, and they're doing the best they can. So how are we going to make it fun? We're going to add that movement in. Now, there's many, many different ways to do movement breaks. These are just some ideas to help kids who always, they're kind of wiggly and they need to move and they're more active and it's hard for them to sit still. So we're going to schedule our breaks, schedule that movement break, and then we can do different things. Yoga stretches are great for kids because, you can make it fun for them. You can make it, even the names, downward dog, we can do downward dog, and then we can do that cat stretch. We can do roar like a lion. That's a good one. There's so many animals in there that you can really make yoga stretches fun, but you're getting the kids the movement they need and helping them get some of that, that good gross motor input while they're working on those stretches. And then we talked a little bit about mindfulness and using those deep inhales and deep exhales. Even doing that, you can incorporate movement into your inhalation and your exhalation by bringing your arms out when you're inhaling, bringing them in when you're exhaling, and just, putting your hands on your belly, feeling your belly blow up like a balloon when you inhale, and then feeling it deflate when you exhale. So using those ways to incorporate that. But what's some ideas when kids have to sit in their chair and they have to be still? We can use those move and sit cushions. A move and sit cushion is an air-filled cushion, and it can either be in a wedge shape, or it can be, it's an air-filled cushion that's like circular. And I actually have one of those. So this is our move and sit. And as you can, I don't know if you can see that, but it has bumps or ridges on one side and bumps on the other side. And you put that, you see how it just kind of gently moves? You put that in the chair, and then the movement a little bit while they're sitting, having to sit fairly still. So I'll put it down, and then, you know, it's not a lot of movement, it's just a little bit of twitching side to side, then you can get the movement. Now, you can fill them up different ways. They can bounce, they can do whatever they need to do. The ball chairs are really good for that, being able to bounce up and down while you're learning. And there's a lot of schools now that are putting those ball chairs into some of their rooms. The other thing, if you don't have access to a move and sit cushion, you can do a pillow. A pillow works pretty good at giving a little bit of flexibility and movement. But another thing you can do is swim rings. They're great for getting swim, you know, you don't inflate them fully, but giving that little bit of movement. But of course, there's other things. If you have the ability, the time, the space, then you can do going out into your yard and doing a couple laps up and down the yard just to run really fast. These don't have to be long breaks, but they just need to be enough to incorporate a little bit of movement into that child's day so that they're able to refocus and learn. Okay, now's the hard part. Power struggles. So we have a lot of power struggles in our life and with our kids, and there are so many times when even as adults we may forget and get into power struggles with someone else and forget to kind of let things go. So there's different ways that we know will work for children who tend to get into power struggles all the time. One of the things we really have to do is provide boundaries for them. So we can do the boundaries by incorporating timers, as we've talked about. You know, so we need to look at time boundaries, those specific start and finishes to the routines, helping the kids learn what they need to do to work on something for a specific number of time. Now, the timer that we have here, this is very similar to a time timer, which decreases the time. They usually have red, or there's some that have pictures, but as it ticks away, it gets less and less and less. That's a great visual cue for kids who need that time boundary, but they can't just wait for the clock to ring. They need to see the clock decreasing. I love the time timer because it does have the red on there that starts to get smaller and smaller and smaller, and kids can see their accomplishments that way, and they know how much time they have left before they get their breaks. So providing a time boundary is a great idea for decreasing power struggles. Again, we're going to set them up for success, and we're going to do that by giving them what they need so that they're not always getting into these power struggles. And then scheduled breaks, of course, we've talked a lot about that, and then making those movement breaks if they need that. Another good thing to do on a break, though, is to get them a glass of water or something, something small to snack on or something cold to drink. We know that cold drinks a lot of times will increase attention, so we can use, a drink on their break to help them focus, regain focus, and come back feeling a lot better, and they're hydrated. So we know how well hydration is for learning and keeping that brain moving. Also, with those drinks, if you use those long sippy straws, you're working on the inhalation as they're drinking. Before they're drinking, you can work on inhalation with the long straw, and then once you put it in the water, of course, you don't want to be breathing in while you're drinking, but using long sippy straws are a good idea for during breaks. And then another boundary to really work on is defining the child's space. So we got those kids who want to move from room to room, and they don't have their pencils in one area, and they don't have their paper because they left that in the other spot. So it's better if you give them a place where they keep all their supplies and they have everything there at hand. So defining their space, giving them a dedicated space, will give them that space boundary that they need. And then, of course, those clear expectations. Teachers, you guys are so good at setting those. You have your rules outlined for the class, and the important thing about these rules that are set, they're kind of, they're like mega rules. So they tell the whole class what to do, and they don't focus so much on what not to do. So when we're setting those expectations, to make them clear, we need to tell our kids what they have to do. It's really good in the classroom. A lot of times they'll say, use your inside voice. So instead of saying, stop screaming, stop yelling, they just keep that rule, use your inside voice. And then you might hear them say that we're going to listen quietly with her mouth closed while someone else is talking. Another nice rule in the classroom that teachers have are keep your hands to yourself. We don't get outside of our space. We keep our hands to ourselves. And also the rule of raising your hand when you have a question teaches them not to blurt out, and it decreases some of that impulsivity. But again, classroom teachers are great at defining the expectations and telling children what they need to do rather than what they don't need to do. And that makes it so much easier when something goes wrong. Instead of blaming what happened, you blame it on the rules. Oh, remember, we have to listen quietly while others are talking. So we have to use our ears and close our mouth so that we can listen quietly. So at the same time, you're teaching them how to listen quietly, but you're giving them those clear expectations, and you're blaming the rules for why they can't shout and carry on when someone else is talking. I think you guys got the idea of that. So the last thing we're going to talk about for power struggles is how to work on problem solving. So our kids who engage in power struggles love to test limits. So let's look at some of the things we can do for those kids who just love to disrupt and test limits. When I have a child who always wants to push the boundaries, who wants to test the limits, one of the things I'm going to help them do is work on brainstorming and giving them choices. But I like to do you can either do this or this, so they get that visual cue. You have two choices. You can pick this one or you can pick this one. you want to present that choice as their idea of coming up with the answer, so that it's not always you telling them exactly what to do. But in this instance, you want them to think of the answer and to come up with that answer themselves. So you can say things like, I don't know what you want to decide or what you will decide, but you can either do it this way. We have a couple choices. We can do it this way, or we can do it this way. What do you think you want to do? What could you do? Or you might present it to them after you've given them those choices. Well, what might happen if we do it this way? What might happen if you choose to run off rather than sitting down and finishing your work? What might happen tonight if we are still trying to finish your homework and it's supposed to be time for your show? Helping them think through things, helping them work on that brainstorming, but trying to make it more of their idea is very good at your children who are always testing limits. And so then again, predicting consequences. And I think we've kind of talked about that. Now, the final thing you want to do on that is you want to follow up with them. So after they've identified their choice, and you've made clear that it was their decision and their choice, then you might want to come back and say, well, how did that work out for you? Or if it's something that you've worked on that's going to happen later, maybe it's a problem they were having in school with a friend and you worked on with them on brainstorming out different choices, then you might want to follow up with them and say, did you try that at school? Well, how did that work out? Just to give them the knowledge that you're going to follow up with them and help them, again, if they continue to have problems. And then the last thing we want to do with our kids who are having a little bit more time, a little bit more difficulty because they like to test boundaries, and we are trying not to have a power stroke with them. We want to work on some of those supportive things that will help them. So of course, working on developing empathy, being empathetic towards your child, but also helping them develop empathy towards others. So it's a great idea to say, well, how did that make you feel? Good. And how do you think that made me feel? So we want to start early with that, and we want to start having children not only being able to identify their own feelings, but also how their actions make other people feel. Another thing we want to do to show our support for our kids is we want to make sure that we stay involved in what's going on in their world. And so, I talked to you about the importance of following up with them when they do make choices and how that their decision came out. We can also, that's one way of staying involved, but we can also work on staying involved in their classes, knowing who their teachers are, knowing who their best friends are, just talking to them about what's going on and letting them know that what they do is important to us. We can offer encouragement, of course. I think every parent knows that, but we also want to make sure that we're incorporating leisure into their routines. So kids are super busy nowadays, and they always have something else, the next step plan. They've always got things going on, but let's work on not just helping them, making sure they have leisure time, but sharing that leisure time with them. And so this can be, something that you both love to do, or it can be something you want to introduce your child to. It can be taking a walk in the park and just spending time together. It's just so important to have leisure time And sometimes we do have to schedule that leisure time so that it becomes part of our routine. And it helps us spend time together and develop that strength and that bond. And then don't forget the friends and relatives, and making sure that of course they have time to spend with their friends and relatives, but also, you know, it's hard to work with a child who is always engaging in power struggles or trying to engage in power struggles. So while you're trying to turn around some things in your world, don't forget to rely on those friends and relatives to help you out. And they can just be your sounding board, or they may be able to give you a break once in a while. I think that is all I had tonight. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you have been able to pick up some nice, helpful tips that will help you move forward when your child needs a little bit extra help settling down and learning. So the last thing I'd like to do is find out if there's any questions. And you can put those in the chat box. And I will stop that share and give you all a few minutes. I know we covered a lot and you may not have time to process it all. I would like you to know that Enable My Child is always there to support you and support your child if you are having a hard time and struggling with some of these things and doing them on your own. So we are always willing to work with you and to problem solve and help you help your child. It's been a great night. Thank you all. And I'm not seeing any questions coming in. Okay, there's just this one about this mother said that she does have a hard time with the power struggles, and sometimes she forgets to step back and follow some of, she knows that she's getting into power struggles. So her question is, how do you remember yourself not to get involved with your child? And you know, that's a great question. So it's when you have a child who is more spirited and likes to engage in power struggles, and you know you're their parent and your job is to kind of guide them and lead them, it's not the easiest thing not to get caught up. So what I like to advise is taking time, especially if you know that about yourself, taking time for yourself to kind of set the tone before you engage. So you have something that you know is very difficult for your child to do, and let's take bedtime. And bedtime, there's always power struggle every night at bedtime because they don't want to stop what they're doing, and they don't want to go to bed. So one of the things you want to do before you even remind them that it's bedtime, or before you start that bedtime routine, is settle yourself down. So you can take a few minutes for yourself. If you know that deep breathing works for you, then kind of settle your own breath down. Go in with a fresh approach. So last night it was hard, but we don't want to think about last night when we're talking about tonight. You know, we don't want to constantly let the negative thoughts dwell into our head. So just start each night as a fresh approach. Take time to calm yourself down, calm your breathing, slow your breathing down so that you're approaching it with a little bit of a new attitude. And it takes time. It's hard to learn, but a lot of times if you go into an environment that's already heated and you already know it's going to be difficult, then you're going to go in already kind of ready for the fight. So you got to back it up. Think about tonight's going to be a new night. We're going to do it a little bit differently. I'm going to stay calm, and then I'm going to go in and talk to my little one. See if there's anything else. Yeah, you're welcome. It is difficult, yes. Okay. And I'm not seeing any more questions. So again, I'm Dr. Shelli Dry, and this was our monthly presentation. We will have a new webinar for you all in June. Just check the calendar. All right. Good night.